Right now, somewhere on the moon, 2 golf balls are sitting in the grey dust. They have been there for over 50 years. Nobody is going to bring them back. Think about that for a second. We spent billions of dollars to reach another world. We built the most advanced machines in human history. And one of the first things a person did up there was take a golf swing. Between 1969 and 1972, only 12 human beings ever walked on the moon. And almost every one of them did something strange, secret, or downright bizarre while they were there. They held a private church service. They left a tiny statue of a fallen man. One of them ran a secret experiment NASA never approved. So what did astronauts really do up there? The honest answer is far stranger than the history books admit. By the end of this, the moon will feel less like a science mission and more like the weirdest road trip ever taken. Let's start with that golf swing, because the story is even funnier than it sounds. February 1971, Apollo 14. Commander Alan Shepard had quietly smuggled something onto the spacecraft. Hidden in his gear was the head of a 6-iron golf club and 2 ordinary golf balls. He attached the club head to the handle of a tool normally used for scooping up moon rocks. There was one problem. His pressurized suit was so stiff he could only swing with one arm. His first 2 swings completely missed and just sprayed grey moon dust everywhere. The third was a shank, but the 4th one finally connected. He watched the ball sail away and shouted, "Miles and miles and miles." It was not miles. When scientists studied the photos decades later, they found the balls went about 24 and 40 yards. Still, with no air to slow them and only 1/6 of Earth's gravity, even a clumsy chip floated farther than any shot on Earth. And here is the kicker. Shepard had to swing right-handed only, because the suit just would not let him grip with both. A test pilot, a war hero, the first American in space, reduced to flailing at a golf ball with one arm. Both golf balls are still up there. They might just be the loneliest sports equipment in the universe. Now, golf was a stunt, but the very next mission did something that belongs in a physics textbook. August 1971, Apollo 15. Commander Dave Scott had a 300-year-old question to settle. 4 centuries earlier, Galileo claimed that all objects fall at exactly the same speed as long as you remove the air that slows the light ones down. On Earth, you can never prove it cleanly. There is always air in the way. The moon, of course, has none. So Scott held a heavy aluminium hammer in one hand and a single falcon feather in the other. The feather was named after the lunar module which the crew had called Falcon. Live on camera, beaming back to Earth, he let them both go at exactly the same moment. And they hit the ground together. The feather did not flutter, it dropped like a stone, a 300-year-old idea finally proven on another world, in front of a watching planet. How is that for a science fair project? But the strangest things up there were not experiments at all. Rewind to the very first landing, and one of the best-kept secrets of the entire space program. July 1969, Apollo 11. The Eagle has just landed in the Sea of Tranquility. Before those famous first steps, the crew had a few quiet hours of scheduled downtime, and Buzz Aldrin used that time to do something he had told almost no one about. He pulled out a tiny silver chalice, a small vial of wine, and a thin wafer of bread. Aldrin was an elder at his church. He had quietly gotten permission to bring communion all the way to the moon. He poured the wine into the little cup, and in 1/6 gravity, something beautiful happened. The wine curled slowly and gracefully up the side of the cup, moving like nothing he had ever seen. So the very first liquid ever poured on the moon, and the first food ever eaten there, were communion. Here is the strange part. NASA asked him to keep it off the live broadcast. They were nervous about a lawsuit over religion in space, so they quietly hushed it up. Instead, Aldrin simply read a short Bible verse to himself over the radio and ate in silence. Think about it. The most public event in human history had a hidden, intimate moment at its very center. The whole world watched the first steps, never knowing the first meal was a quiet, private prayer. Some of what astronauts did up there was not strange at all. It was deeply, achingly human. Back to Apollo 15, the same mission as the feather, the crew carried a tiny secret in their pocket. It was a small aluminum statue, just 3.5 inches tall, of a figure lying down. A Belgian artist had made it. They called it the fallen astronaut. Beside it, in the dust, they laid a small metal plaque listing 14 names. 8 American astronauts and 6 Soviet cosmonauts, all of whom had died trying to reach space. Stop and think about that. In the middle of a Cold War, on the surface of the moon, they chose to honor their rivals right alongside their own dead. Then they kept the whole thing a secret until after they had made it home safely. There was no ceremony, no speech, no broadcast. Just a small statue laid quietly in the dust. It is still there today, untouched. The only art gallery on another world, and it remembers the dead. Quick question for you before we go further. If you had 1 minute on the moon, what would you leave behind? Tell me in the comments. Because one astronaut left the most personal thing imaginable. April 1972. Apollo 16. Astronaut Charlie Duke reached carefully into his suit pocket. He pulled out a small family photo, wrapped in clear plastic and a little crumpled from the pocket. It showed him, his wife, and their 2 young sons, all smiling for a studio camera. He set it gently down on the lunar surface and took a picture of the picture. On the back, he had written a message to anyone or anything that might one day find it. This is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke from planet Earth, who landed on the moon. And here is the heartbreaking part. In direct sunlight, the moon climbs to over 200 degrees. That little plastic photo almost certainly cooked and faded long ago. But the gesture is forever. A man stood on another world and he wanted it to know his family. Alright, let's lighten the mood, because the moon also got its own car. The lunar rover was a 4-wheeled electric buggy folded up like origami inside the lander. It was designed to cruise at about 8 kilometers an hour. That is barely walking pace. But astronauts being astronauts, they did not exactly stick to the speed limit. On the very last mission, Apollo 17, the rover hit 18 kilometers an hour. That is the all-time land speed record on any world other than Earth. And to this day, it still belongs to a 1970s buggy with bicycle-style wire mesh wheels. There were no roads, no signs, and absolutely no way to call for a tow if you got stuck out there. And all 3 rovers are still parked up there right where the astronauts left them. Batteries long dead. If you are enjoying the parts of space history nobody talks about, hit subscribe. The next one is the weirdest yet. Here is the twist almost nobody knows. One astronaut ran a secret experiment on the way to the moon. Apollo 14, 1971. Yes, the same mission as the Golf. The astronaut was Edgar Mitchell. Weeks before launch, 4 people back on Earth had quietly agreed to help him. Mitchell believed thoughts might be able to travel across space. He wanted to test telepathy. During his rest periods, he would stare hard at cards printed with random numbers and symbols. He concentrated with everything he had, and his friends back home wrote down whatever popped into their minds. He never told NASA. This was happening on a billion-dollar mission completely off the books. The results were vague, easy to dismiss, and never officially counted for anything at all. Now some of you are thinking this sounds made up. It is verified. He wrote about it openly for years. Mitchell later said standing on the moon changed him completely, and he spent the rest of his life chasing the unexplained. For a brief, strange moment, a man on his way to the moon tried to send his thoughts back to Earth. Low gravity made the astronauts a little playful. Honestly, can you blame them? On Apollo 16, Commander John Young leaped clean off the surface while saluting the American flag. He floated up in his bulky suit and froze mid-air in a perfect jumping salute caught on camera. He only got about 2 feet off the ground, but in that stiff suit and 1/6 gravity, it felt like flying. They had even planned a lunar Olympics with high jumps and long jumps in 1/6 gravity. They ran out of time and skipped it, which frankly is one of history's great missed opportunities. But the strangest discovery of all was not something they did, it was something they smelled. Fine moon dust clung to everything, and the astronauts tracked it back into the cabin on their suits. When they took their helmets off, the dust had a smell, and every single crew described it the same way: spent gunpowder. As one astronaut put it, like someone had just fired a gun inside the spacecraft. And the weirdest twist of all, the smell vanished by the time the dust reached labs on Earth. The leading theory is that this dust had sat undisturbed in a vacuum for billions of years, and meeting oxygen and moisture inside the cabin for the first time made it briefly react and briefly stink. More than 50 years later, nobody has ever fully explained what those astronauts were breathing in. Now let's add it all up. Because after 6 landings, the moon is not nearly as pristine as you imagine. We tend to picture the moon as clean and empty. The truth is the landing sites are scattered with stuff. Humans have left over 400,000 pounds of stuff up there. 12 cameras, 12 pairs of boots, even a gold-plated telescope, 2 golf balls naturally, and piles of heavy gear they no longer needed. Why leave it behind? The reason is simple: they had to make room for the moon rocks they were bringing home. Every pound of precious rock coming back meant a pound of equipment had to be left behind. And here is the fact that makes everyone laugh first, then quietly cringe. There are 96 bags of human waste sitting on the surface of the moon right now. Left there, of course, to save weight on the long trip home. Believe it or not, scientists actually want those bags back. They could reveal whether any microbes survived decades exposed on the harsh lunar surface. So somewhere in that pile of junk might be one of the most valuable biology experiments ever, completely by accident. There is one more thing down there too. Every American flag the astronauts planted is still standing, though after 50 years of brutal sunlight, they have almost certainly all faded to plain white. So what did astronauts really do on the moon? They played golf. They dropped a feather to settle a 300-year-old argument with the universe. They held communion in secret. They left a statue for the fallen and a photograph of a family. And the dust on their boots smelled, impossibly, like spent gunpowder. They broke the off-world land speed record. One of them quietly tried to read minds across space. They saluted mid-jump. They smelled gunpowder in the dust, and they left a whole junkyard behind. 12 people, 6 landings, a handful of days scattered across just 3 short years. And in that tiny window, they turned the moon into something nobody had ever expected it to be. Not just a science target, a place where human beings laughed, prayed, grieved, and goofed around. Tonight, go outside and look up at the moon. It looks empty, silent, and far away. But up there, in the grey dust, 2 golf balls are still waiting. And so is everything else we left. Next time, the astronauts who got lost, stranded, and very nearly never made it home. Until then, keep looking up. The strangest stories are written in the quietest places.